Another D-Day anniversary has passed, while police arrest 15 Pro Hamas terrorists at McGill University. This is the Great White North Report. Now, D-Day evokes a lot of memories within the Canadian consciousness, at least for those who are Canadian and are proud to be Canadian. Many of us had family who served in World War II. I know my grandfather did. He wasn't at D-Day. He was an aero mechanic. He was part of the Canadian Air Training Program that trained Commonwealth flyers from all across the Commonwealth and the United States. He would fix the planes, so he was all over Ontario, Manitoba, New Brunswick. He even went to Newfoundland, which wasn't part of Canada yet. It was a British colony on its own, so he actually got the overseas medal. He had a very soft war. I had a great uncle who died of sickness in World War II. I had another great uncle who served in the tanks in Italy, in the Sicilian campaign and the Italian campaign, but then he switched over to the mortar pool. My dad's first cousin, he arrived too late for D-Day, but he was part of the liberation of Holland, and then went on to help Germans as an ambulance driver. He helped rebuild part of the rebuilding of Europe, so to speak. I had another great uncle who was an entertainer. He was part of the Canadian Civilian Concert Party. So my family did their share during World War II. None of them were at D-Day, which was a very amazing thing. 160,000 men were part of the initial invasion force. And they had ceremonies for the 80th anniversary of the D-Day landings. Canada had their own beach called the Juno Beach, which is why we have the Juno Awards in honor. And you can see we have some parachutists here. 13 Canadian veterans of the Second World War were in attendance for Thursday's anniversary ceremonies at Juno Beach. Our Veteran Affairs Minister was there. It'll likely be the last attended by veterans of the European campaign, but the federal government will continue to mark the occasion. Why? Because most of them are dead. Of those 13 veterans, most of them will be almost 100 years old. The youngest, I think, was 16 years old. The oldest were, in their 20s. Most of the veterans from World War II are dead, and the lessons that they brought are fading. Trudeau said Canadians come together as one. Not necessarily true. He paid tribute, but Trudeau did pay tribute to the sacrifice made by the Allied forces, including 14,000 Canadians who landed at Juno Beach. Francophones, Anglophones, Indigenous people, and New Canadians came together as one. Brave Canadians like you sacrificed everything for our freedom. There are no words to describe the immensity of the debt we owe you. 359 Canadians were killed on D-Day, so that's just the first day of the landings. We landed, we got our beach, and we started moving inland. That's when things got a little more hairier, especially around the city of Caen. Prince William also honored the Canadians who stood shoulder to shoulder with British troops to ensure fascism was conquered. Now, Trudeau did a big goof. I think he said the Russians should be allowed to attend the D-Day ceremonies. I am in total disagreement with that. For me, the Russians were nothing more than convenient allies. They weren't our allies in 1939 and didn't join in until Hitler decided to invade Russia. Then they became our allies. So for them, it was a matter of convenience to be allied to us, just because they would have, otherwise the Russians would have sat out the war and waited to see what happened and try and take advantage of any weak situations. So for me, the Russians were sitting on the fence for the longest time. When they did finally get in the war, they were all on the east, we were all in the west. We supplied the hell out of them with a lot of stuff, especially light trucks and other equipment. Many Allied sailors lost their lives bringing supplies up there, getting hit by U-boats. So all these are going on, demonstrating Canadian heroism and unselfishness. We then have these idiots in McGill University who are sponsoring a Hamas terrorist organization, who are very much like the Nazis themselves. They will kill the Jewish people given the chance, and eventually any non-Muslims. So everyone knows that McGill University, like the University of Toronto, McMaster, Western, a lot of universities have these little encampments that are sponsored by groups that have ties to Hamas and Qatar. And recently they went from the campus and they decided to take over a building and hung the Palestinian flag. Now, this flag means nothing to me. You can take that flag and wipe your arse with it. And why isn't Trudeau calling the Emergencies Act? When they do this kind of stuff, the trucker convoy never once took over a building. They took over the streets, yes, but they never once took over a building. They didn't destroy massive amounts of any property. It was just noisy and inconvenient for people going downtown. Now, the campus administration has been trying to get them out of there, off campus and out of the area, because it is a danger. It is very anti-Semitic. Hell, Jewish people here in Canada have nothing to do with what's going on over there. We really don't have anything to do with what's going on over there. Hamas started a war, and Israel's going to finish it. These are the kind of idiots we didn't have in World War II when we were fighting Nazis. The nation was pretty much unified in our support for World War II. We don't have that kind of thing anymore. We have people protesting for a fight that's not even ours. Israel is a democratically elected country. It is a diverse country in that sense, where there's white people, black people, people with all shades of the tan line. There are Muslims, there are Christians, there are Jewish people living in Israel with all the rights. LGBTQ is allowed in Israel, though it's not exactly welcomed all the time. Well, you have the Gaza Strip, which is ruled by Hamas, and you see the clear distinction of what happens when you invite terrorists to run your country or run your area. And then they export this shit here, and they've really infiltrated the student organizations. So these idiots took over the building, and then finally the Montreal police were able to go in, used tear gas to disperse a crowd of protesters, and arrested 15 people on Thursday evening after mass demonstrators occupied the third floor of McGill University James Administration Building. Now, first of all, I would unmask them. They're unmasked. They're known. If they're not Canadian citizens, ship them off to Gaza. Let them see. Let them join Gaza. They so badly want to support Hamas. Let them join. Yeah, it's safe to protest over here, but go over there and see what it's like. Police also faced off with protesters gathered outside the administrative building. They used tear gas to disperse the crowd. Still got the encampment, but they had arrested 13 people for breaking and entering and 2 others for interfering with police officers. So protesters threw objects at police officers and vandalized the exterior of the administration building. Again, arrest them all, process them, let them find out what it is. Now, solidarity for Palestinian human rights. McGill posted a lengthy statement saying the university so far shut down its demands for McGill to divest from companies with ties to Israel. No, why would I divest ties? I would divest ties with Qatar and Iran. Students have blockaded themselves inside the building to take ownership of the university that continues to fund and be complicit in the genocide of the Palestinian people. First of all, what's a Palestinian? Most of them are ethnically Egyptian anyway. Or they're from the Caucasians, or even Armenians, I believe. Of course, they love to turn the Zionist forces push deeper into Rafah. This is all World War II era propaganda that the Nazis proposed. It's perpetuating horrific crimes and massacres. The only reason civilians are getting killed in Gaza is because Hamas is buried so far underground and within the civilian population that of course people are going to get killed. So this is the time you invoke the Emergencies Act and you really start banning these student organizations and looking where the money comes from. Because who's funding these guys? Rula Judi Abisab, a professor of Islamic history at McGill. Yeah, right. The standard Islamic history, the standard Islamic narrative, attended the protest Thursday evening. This university is actually putting its head in the sand. This is shameful. This is all shameful. Really, talk about putting head in the sand? That's the Islamic standard narrative. It has so many holes in it. Anyone who does a deep dive into Islam will understand that Islam is built on a house of sand. They've been agitating for a rightful, just, and moral cause when it's asking McGill instances. Really, morally, it's morally okay to support a terrorist organization like Hamas. The Arab leaders are the ones to blame for telling these people originally to leave their homes and you can come back later. And they wouldn't let them come back anyway. The Israelis, Palestinian didn't even become a thing until the 1960s when Arafat hijacked the name. They were just Arabs. And they have their own country called Jordan. But the people who now call themselves Palestinians fucked that up. As well as Lebanon, Kuwait. All sorts of countries don't want them. Unfortunately, they're embedded into Lebanon now. genocide which Israel has been carrying out against the Palestinian people. No, they have not. They are conducting a war. There is a major difference. By their definition of genocide, we could have had that applied to us back in World War II, where we were bombing the hell out of the German nation to force Hitler's war machine to bow out. Hitler wouldn't surrender, and that's why the Germans took a tremendous punishment during World War II. Hitler and the main Nazis would not surrender. The same thing's going on in Gaza right now. The Hamas leadership will not surrender, so the people are going to suffer until it's over. So the minute you start taking over buildings, that's when your peacefully protesting ends. Now you hear a lot of them chant intifada. That means violence. This is why Trudeau's immigration policy has been a failure. When you're bringing in people that are very anti-Semitic into our country and allowing them to live here, it is not good. Also, Islam is a political ideology. It is not a religion per se. You have to do a deep dive into Islam to understand this. Right now, the Muslim population is not as aggressive simply because they're a minority and it's growing. When it becomes like 15 to 20%, they'll become more vocal about having certain rights. Like already we have to put prayer rooms in schools and businesses to accommodate them, which is total bullshit. If you want to pray 5 times a day, go pray outside. You don't need a special room. All you have to do is look east. How hard can that be? So the police have they've had their hands tied. They don't want to be seen bearing down because city officials won't let them to. And the government's not exactly giving them any real direction. Trudeau is not, because they're not protesting against Trudeau personally, though they have harassed him on occasion. It's not like they're all parked out in front of Ottawa where thousands of people are chanting for Trudeau to go. It's not a personal attack. But it's interesting where the money's coming from for these idiots. And the U.S. has started to really look into all these protests that have sprung up around their own country and came to the conclusion that Canada's own network of pro-Palestinian encampments, protests, and blockades. And they found that in both Canada and the United States, details on its funding and alleged links to Palestinian terrorists. And they're wondering how Pro Hamas propaganda and illegal encampment are being funded. The letter is addressed to National Students for Justice in Palestine, National SJP, which is started by a professor out in Berkeley, who also has ties to the Muslim Brotherhood, which is a supporter of Hamas. The Canadian affiliates include Solidarity for Palestinian Human Rights, the central organizer of an illegal Palestinian solidarity encampment on the campus of McGill University. McGill chapter of Solidarity for Palestinian Human Rights was behind a March blockade of the site of the Montreal Holocaust Museum, as well as several targeted shutdowns of McGill's Bronfman building, which is named after a Jewish philanthropist, Samuel Bronfman. The Bronfmans, I think they used to own the Montreal Canadiens at one time, if I'm not mistaken. McGill denounced SPHR for threatening tactics, including hanging Netanyahu in effigy and dispatching mass crowds to the homes of school administrators. So they're very aggressive and very demanding and very threatening. The time has come to arrest them all and kick them out. So this organization is open about its Canadian operation, running on its website that supports 200 Palestinian solidarity organizations on campus colleges across occupied Turtle Island, U.S. and Canada. That perfectly sounds like us in Canada, turtling. Our government is turtled. It's a subsidiary of American Muslims for Palestine, who in turn substantial ties to Hamas via its financial sponsor, Americans for Justice in Palestine Educational Foundation, Inc. So these people are all supporting a terrorist organization. Simple as that. 250 North American affiliates have become the chief purveyor of terms such as Israeli apartheid and calls to globalize the intifada. Because it's so scattered, it allows them to operate chapters spreading the radical ideology in U.S. universities from behind a facade of grassroots campus activism. And Stephen Crowder did this on his webcast. He went right through it all. Trail of Donation shows a series of blurred lines when it comes to liberal causes and democratic politics. Small group of wealthy heavyweights are often playing an outsized role funding many of them. Tides Foundation, which was closed down, and they claim that they're one guy for the JVP, representative, was on Parliament Hill to deliver a press conference stating that the country's network of pro-Intifada campus encampments were not anti-Semitic. Really? The whole point of that is against Israel, is against Jewish people. Canadian branch of the Tides Foundation was also a key player in the years-long, multi-million-dollar activist drive to landlock Alberta oil. Thanks a lot, assholes. So why isn't Canada probing the illegal dark money that these protesters are getting? The Toronto Sun, they did that too. I remember covering that. So they're all under the charitable organization status. But they're furthering terrorism and organization against Canadian public policy. If they want an Islamic State here in Canada eventually. That's what's going to happen if we bring in so many more Muslims and it becomes a tipping point. Right now, and these are people that got out of their Islamic countries, trying to get away from it. Now they're bringing it back. They just can't live without it. So Canada's lackluster responses have really hurt us because our own national security intelligence services are so underfunded and understaffed. The minute they did the initial wave of celebratory Canadian rallies orchestrating the immediate wake of October 7 attacks was organized by the Palestinian Youth Movement. Well, there's that one idiot imam in BC who's with the youth movement, Muslim youth movement. He is very pro-violent. So the National Post brought this article out, and CBC, of course, doesn't do any real journalistic digging, as far as I can see. That's the problem with CBC. They don't do their due diligence when journalism. That's what happens when you're a left-wing news outlet that seems to be a spokesperson for Trudeau. The National Post at least does something, as does the Toronto Sun. So I look at this like we went from D-Day, where Canadians were pretty much united, ready to go against the evils of the world. We're honoring our vets on D-Day, and then we got to deal with these idiots. Oh yeah, they support Hamas so much. Let them go back and die for Hamas. Go back and fight. We Canadians fought. My own maternal grandfather, he tried to enlist 3 times in World War II. They wouldn't take him because he was a farmer and he was an only son. Family had a lot to do with it because too many times in World War I, a lot of families lost their only son or lost all their sons in the war. So they stopped allowing. That's what Saving Private Ryan and the Fighting Sullivans and all that other stuff was all about. Because back in my grandfather's day, if you didn't serve in the army, you were considered a coward. There was a lot of pressure to join. We don't have that same kind of commitment today. And it's because of the immigration policies that the Trudeaus have implemented. First Pierre opening the doors wide open, and then Justin right now. Not saying it's been totally bad, but it's not exactly been very good as far as unity goes. Canadian nationalism has been decreasing. I've seen it with my own eyes. Anyway, any Canadians out there, let me know what you guys think. Should we be invoking the Emergencies Act against these people? And should we be looking closer at where the money's coming from? Leave comments in the comment section. Until next time, this has been the Great White North Report.